Hello and welcome to Conversations With. I'm your host, Leigh Toney, Executive Director of the Miami-Dade College Carrie P. Meek Entrepreneurial Education Center. I am really delighted to have as our guest on our show today someone whose work I have been introduced to several years ago. I've read many of his works. He's a name, or certainly his work is one that you will know. Mr. Clifton Taulbert is my guest today. He's a serial entrepreneur. He's a serial author. He's very involved in consulting and community advocacy, and we're just delighted to have you on Conversations With today. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you. It's my pleasure being here.
So as I said, I've read your book, and I've probably, people see me coming now, they probably want to run the other way because she's going to talk about that Ice House book. But I was introduced to your work, Who Owns the Ice House in particular, several years ago as an entrepreneurship educator, and have been talking to my colleagues and staff about it and students for several years now. And you're here today also talking about your newest book, 8 Habits of the Heart. So all of these books for me is that talk about that place in each of us that grounds us before we move out to do anything else. So what is your foundation? What is your basis? What's in your heart and what's in your mindset? Can you talk to me about why mindset is so essential to success in life?
That's a lot of questions, and I think I can get maybe a succinct answer for you. But what grounds me, and I think at any day, any given time, we're all grounded by the world that surrounds us. Sometimes the grounding is not good, and sometimes the grounding is absolutely what you need. I was very fortunate in that many of the circumstances that surrounded our lives while growing up in the Mississippi Delta were negative circumstances. But there was this internal circle of friends and family that I call the porch people. They made all the difference in the world. That's where the high expectations live. That's where the dependability lived. That's where the friendship lived. That's where the courage lived. And of course, that's where the hope and the nurturing lived. And it was encountering those people who exemplified those habits of the heart, those acts of unselfishness that really grounded me and gave fuel to my vision that I could do something, that I didn't have to accept the norm, that I could think outside of the box, and I could expect things to happen to me and for me beyond what I could see on a day-to-day basis.
There are a lot of names for what you call the porch people. If you ask the academicians, they'll call it social capital. If you ask some of our national politicians, they'll call it the village. So what do you think is the state of the village today compared to when you were a young man?
I think that the village is in some form of disarray because the village worked so well for so long. I think that in the 60s, the turnover of one generation turning it over to the next, I think that fell apart. Whereas prior to the 60s, I think the baton was passed very successfully from one generation to the next. And they realized what was expected of them and accepted that wholeheartedly. But in the 60s, I think the whole nation became more individualized, more focused on themselves and their individual success. And I think the village sort of fell prey to that. But the idea of still using the concept, be it the village, the porch people, or others, I think the idea that people are willing to share their unselfishness with others on a consistent and continuous basis really makes the difference in how our young people turn out and what our communities will look like.
I think what intrigued me the most about your work, Mr. Taulbert, was the way that you were weaving together education, business, and values. And your books talk very clearly and very plainly, but also very powerfully about the necessity for all three of those factors to be working together.
Yeah, you're right, and I'm glad that you found that, because I don't know if I said it as nicely, as succinctly as you did, but those things do work together. It's very difficult to accomplish anything alone. Sandra made a very poignant quote that nothing of value is accomplished by any one single person, but we all weave the threads that are needed in building something of value. And I certainly agree with that statement, and I agree that the community of people that surrounded me, their vision for me became my vision eventually. So the idea and the notion that, that people matter and that people can really help you, and that this same idea has resonance within the business community, because I'm not afraid to take this to the business world. I know that the business world like charts and graphs and a lot of percentages and a lot of pie charts, and there's nothing wrong with that, because data does tell a story, an incredible story. But at the end of the day, until we become overrun with androids and robotics, we still have people. And there are certain things that people need in order to perform at their peak and to be their best. And I think that I try to speak to those as being intertwined, not to treat them as separate entities. You can either take them or leave them. But I think we have to really make them all work together if we are to create a very holistic and wholesome community.
I think the way the business community is trying to get at it in recent years has been around this whole question of ethics, and trying to add an ethics course here at the undergraduate level, another ethics course at the graduate level, and all of that's right. But I've heard you in your talks about the conversation about values and ethics starts in, at home, starts in the kindergarten. Do you think this foundational preparation, and it's kind of being in disarray in many communities, has resulted in some of the business failures, the business lapses that we've seen? Would you draw that correlation?
It would be, I would say, I wouldn't draw a direct correlation between what has happened, because I look at the age of the businessmen and women who have gone wrong. They should have known better, because they came up in the era where these values were taught at home. But I think society at large has become so enamored with economic success, the dollar success, the bottom line success. And when that is happening, we tend not to question how it happened. As long as you can show me money coming in, then obviously you must be doing good. And once you start peeling away the layers and you determine that, well, that was some unethical behavior taking place, everybody stands aghast and look like what happened. But we don't ask the questions as we once did, because we are enamored with the outcome of efforts rather than the journey toward those efforts.
I've heard you talk in your books about the porch people that looked out for you and helped you develop into the person that you are, and how you're never out of touch with who you call your younger self, Little Cliff. So when we come back from our first break, we're going to pick up there, and I'm going to I know a lot about you, so let me share about who you are and who Little Cliff is, and how he inspires you in your work today.
Good deal. Thank
you. So on the other side, we'll come back and talk. I hope you'll stay with us in our conversation with Clifton Taulbert. We'll be right back.
Cool programs for hot jobs. Let Miami-Dade College jumpstart your career. We offer bachelor's degrees in film and TV production, electronics engineering, supervision and management, and nursing. Or choose from 300 other programs. With our flexible course schedules, you can take classes during the day, evening, weekend, or online. For more info, visit MDC.edu or call 305-237-8888. Get the knowledge and training for today's in-demand jobs. Register now.
Welcome back to Conversations With. I'm your host, Leigh Toney, and my guest today is Clifton Taulbert, author, entrepreneur, and consultant. We were talking about Little Cliff, and you talk about yourself in your talks about yourself as a very, very young man, and how the underpinnings of who you are today started from the porch people. Can you tell us how you grew from Little Cliff to a man now who consults with economic advisors on a global level and talks with Supreme Court justices? Because our students and a lot of people need to know about the crisis in confidence, or feeling that what they have to say matters. And you operate on some pretty big stages. And how do you grapple with that in your work?
Sometimes today I actually pinch myself or if I'm forced to ask hard questions of myself. You know, how did I get this opportunity that has come my way? And I really do see it as an opportunity, you know, to write. There are millions of writers, but to have your book being embraced by a former Supreme Court justice, even to the point of asking you to come to Washington and to address members of the court and their guests, that is something I never would have thought of. But the preparation for that happened many years earlier. Little Cliff was the recipient of a caring community, ordinary people who rose to extraordinary heights of leadership. And I say leadership in the sense that you do need that North Star in your life, and you do need that person who wants to be that North Star to sort of lead you where you need to go or get you where you want to go. You really do need that, and I was very fortunate. We didn't have a lot of material stuff, but there was plenty of leadership material. There was plenty of vision. Vision was there. They were future focused without even knowing such a term existed. They always kept saying, well, you know, tomorrow, let's look toward tomorrow, let's look toward tomorrow. And I think, unfortunately, today, we have so many people who are so enamored by right now. And right now does not really provide you the mindset. If right now is your push, it doesn't provide you the mindset of investing in 12 years of education, or 8 post-secondary schools of because these things take time. And but if you're future focused, then you look at time from an entirely different perspective. And I think I picked that up there, is that I may not get everything done today, but I'm still headed in that direction. And I'm still trying to make a difference, a positive difference in the world in which I live in. And of course, I think those 8 habits of the heart that were part of my life really still resonates with me. It still drives me. They still make me think of who I am and what is required of me as a human being.
Tell me, who was your first entrepreneurial mentor?
You know, and growing up as I did, you know, within the Porch people, there were those people that I would call entrepreneurial thinkers. We didn't know that term then, but I think in 2008 in Davos, Switzerland, the Economic Council of the World gathered, I think that's their appropriate name, but one of their conclusive statements was that everyone can benefit from an entrepreneurial experience. And I agree with that. One of the men in my life that really impacted me greatly was my Uncle Cleve, who owned the Ice House in Glen Allen. And at the time, even at the time, I knew it to be different because he served the entire community. I mean, there were other entrepreneurs, mind you, but most of these entrepreneurs were in the black community, serving within the black community, because it was very segregated at the time. However, Uncle Cleve had a business that crossed the barriers, if you will, that everyone had to buy ice from him. And that was the first time that I recall this ability to be universal, and you know, to be global, if you were, you know, in the situation in which he was the owner and I was his employee.
In a multicultural community like Miami, predominantly Hispanic, African American, African Caribbean, people from all throughout the Latin America, South America, we are a highly multicultural community. And so you do have folks that are kind of niche entrepreneurs in their community and do very well. But being able to cross the line and cross into other ethnic groups, other communities, and sell services it does take a certain kind of entrepreneurial vision.
Yeah, it does. It takes a degree of tenacity and fortitude and courage, and I'll never stray away from choosing a growth mindset, because choosing the right mindset can really help determine where your journey will take you, because you're going to run into obstacles. You know, hopefully in the next few months I'll complete a new book called 7 Winning Strategies Inside Entrepreneurial Thinking. And the 6th strategy is be prepared to swim upstream, because easy is not guaranteed. And I think it's important. It doesn't mean that you stop or you give up. But when you run into difficulty, it can also be an incredible educator. It can be a professor in your life, helping you to understand what I need to do different. Because if what I'm doing is not working, then I don't want to stay there. You know, I want to pivot, turn around, and get a momentum going in a different direction.
You've been a banker, you've been an entrepreneur, you were on the founding team of the folks who invented Stairmaster. So safe to say you've encountered failure
Oh my gosh.
along your journey?
I've encountered failure. I've encountered the lack of trust. I've encountered things that make you cry at night. I've encountered things that make you jump up with great joy. But that's life. But the thing that I like about the entrepreneurial thinking or thinker is that you don't give up. When the negative things come, you record, you're a human being, but to record is not to lay down and let people walk over you, but it is to stand up and get your second win and start running again.
How much did you start your first business with? How much money did you start with?
You know, to be quite honest with you, my first business did not start with money. It started with an idea in my head. It started with a sense of knowing that this is what I wanted, and I was willing to make it happen. I didn't know quite how, but I had this idea that I could make things happen, and I wasn't quite sure how that would work its way out. But it was a very small deal. There was a man in my community who had a business he wanted to sell, and I knew there was another man in the community who bought businesses. And I had the nerve to get right in the middle of this. I mean, it took all the nerves I had. But I said, if somebody else can do it, so can I. Long story short, I connected the people. The business was sold. Money exchanged hands, and some of it dropped into mine. And that was really the start of the idea that that I could do things. That was because I was banking at the time, and you know that's a profession that you can retire from, and people look forward to that 25 or 30 years. You know, but I always look forward to having something that I had control over, something that was mine.
And I sense from you, you're always looking forward to the next opportunity as
Always.
well.
I mean, always.
We're going to take a break, but when we come back, we'll talk about the importance of being able to recognize opportunities as an entrepreneur, and then we'll talk about some of the work that you've done that'll be very familiar to many of our viewers. So please stay with us in this conversation with Mr. Clifton Taulbert. Welcome back to our last segment of Conversations with. My guest today is Mr. Clifton Taulbert, entrepreneur, banker, global strategist on issues having to do with entrepreneurship and community building, which is something very dear to my heart because my center is located in Liberty City, and educational attainment rates and economic activity are not at the same pace as the rest of the community. So again, what intrigues me with your work is how you bring all three of these factors together. And we left conversation talking about being able to recognize opportunity and figuring out how to capitalize on those opportunities. How important is that?
It's very important. And as I talk with my son, I try and help him to understand that once you get the mindset changed, that you can do something, that you don't have to accept mediocrity, you don't have to accept average. You can move beyond that, and that's important. Once that happens, then every day of your life becomes an opportunity on the way to your house. Because your friends that you meet, the relationships that you have, and who you encounter in the airport or whatever, you're not just looking at a human being, but you're never quite sure the dynamics that will happen as these conversations are ensued, and what can drop out of that. But if you're not expecting yourself to be part of something, you're not looking for that answer. You're not looking for that bright moment. You're not looking for that idea that the conversation would spawn, because you've kind of in the box, and that box is tied very tightly. And that's why I love Dr. Carol Dweck's work on mindset. Is the growth mindset makes you really look at your day as a full day of opportunity, that everyone around you can bring value, and of equal importance, that you can bring value to others as well.
If you're not sitting at a dinner table or involved in an environment where entrepreneurship is almost daily conversation, what can we as educators and people who care about our communities do to help our young people see themselves and to really nurture their entrepreneurial mindsets?
Well, first of all, I think it's so important for us to realize that probably all of us start out with that idea of I can. But maybe it gets shot down a lot. But we can, and that is not to say that everyone will be a leader leading the troops. There will be troops and there will be leaders, and I think I just like being a leader better. But I've learned though, in leading, you also have
absolutely.
There's one coin with two sides, and you can't have one without the other. So again, I think it's important to be ready for the opportunities that come, and to realize, even more importantly, that you are a deserving person to be able to receive this idea and to take it to the next level.
I think your preparation and your background, you're certainly very accomplished academically, in your business pursuits and your entrepreneurial pursuits. You wrote a book that I'm sure a lot of viewers are familiar with, Once Upon a Time When We Were Colored, and you now have written several books, and you told us, we learned a little earlier that you have another book that's coming out called The Invitation. So you dabble into, not dabble, you go really deeply into a lot of really difficult and complex, and you're very good as a storyteller and being able to relate these to people.
Yeah. It's really interesting. I was in Japan. I had to do 27 lectures there, and I'm proud of myself in that I learned how to do my introduction in Japanese. Couldn't say a word after the introduction, but I learned that introduction and right nuance and everything. But what amazed me in Japan, I was introduced as a storyteller. This was several years ago, probably a decade ago. And I was so incensed. I said, I'm a writer. I have an ISBN number. I'm in the Library of Congress. Don't call me a storyteller. But I've later learned that was such a high honor because I think human beings are hardwired for stories. And to be able to take complex issues, challenges, and weave those around a story or use a story to give us a better understanding of how to live with and around or without these things, I think it's a great gift. It's a great gift.
We're in a startup culture. Everybody's interested in finding the next big thing, founding a new company, a new app, a new technology, a new service. How do you see young people meaningfully connecting into that, and their porch people helping them to encourage to live with the successes that are going to happen and that ultimately the failures that are going to happen also?
Well, I call this, in my work with educators and with business leaders, there are two tracks in life, track 1 and track 2. And track 2 has on it building community and entrepreneurial thinking. I use building community first because I think you have to start with the premise that other people matter. You have to move beyond just being selfish. Because even if you are an entrepreneur, most people don't make things just for themselves. They're hoping somebody's going to buy it. So you're not going to get away from establishing good, solid relationships. That's a very, very important part of being a good entrepreneur. And I know for me, the idea of being able to think of something, then take that to the next level and take it to the next level, whatever those levels, however those levels may be defined, I could not do it by myself. I need other people on this journey with me. And I think that's a very important part of a startup, of an entrepreneurial mind, and especially for young people today. Everybody, like you say, do a new app, a new this. But we all won't make really big discoveries, but we can make discoveries that matter. And I think that along the way, for most people, I'm pretty sure Bill Gates had no idea when he and his buddies were in the garage that they were going to end up where they are today. But what they were doing at the moment matter. And that's why when I talk to young people, what is it? It's carpe diem? Seize the moment. Don't get so caught up in the future that hasn't happened. Seize the moment. And I think that that's what entrepreneurs tend to do, is take advantage of the moment, and sometimes that moment turns out to be generations and years that you never could have imagined.
So what I hear you saying is that there is a connection between entrepreneurism and community building.
In my mind, there is, because you're dealing with people, and without community building, without the idea that other people matter, you may use your great gifts to the detriment of others, and may be so selfish, not willing to bring others along. There are a number of things can happen. But when you really understand and really buy into the premise of building community as something that you want to do continuously, and as an entrepreneur, I think that just enhances what you do and really makes a very unique place for you in the market.
So Little Cliff was a little boy growing up in the Mississippi Delta, which in a very challenging time with very few resources. And I see that as being analogous to young people growing up in very challenging circumstances in urban communities. But your porch people helped you, equipped you with what it took for you to be able to be successful and to navigate successfully the world around you and find your place in it. And I think that's essentially what I get from you. Is that what you're trying to communicate in your books to the rest of us, that that's what we have to do for our young people?
We have to create that sense of belonging. You know, technology is a wonderful thing, but it is so individualized as well. You can live with your hand phone, you know, but at the end of the day, I think we need that human interaction. But I think today to build community requires a greater degree of intentionality than it would have required in my day. But I think the return is probably much greater today than it would have been in my time. So.
I think that's a perfect ending. We're going to end there. Mr. Taulbert, thank you so much for being my guest today.
It's a real pleasure.
Delighted and honored to have had you. And I'm delighted and honored to have had you as my audience today. I'm sure you took away from this conversation as much as I did. And I thank you for tuning in to Conversations With, and we'll see you next time.